Do we have more people in the organisation, in the procurement organisation, or does AI just take over everything in procurement?
Coexistence needs to happen over the next 5 years, whatever the situation. What does the future look like for the CPO? Naturally, you're going to start questioning what's it adding alongside smart AI capabilities. And I think CPOs are going to need to stand up and look at their own super strengths. What are the kind of leaders that we really need now to take this stuff forward in the next 5 years?
Hey, it's Mark here, and welcome back to the pod. We're talking about the hype cycle. We're talking whether AI and procurement orchestration is hype or reality, as companies look at how they rewire the operating model for procurement and I guess the business as a whole. Today I got Paras Sood, and we're going to be talking about this whole topic area. We're going to take a bit of an approach of the golden circle, so the why, the how, and the what, and looking at why organizations are changing, the how, and then exactly what they're doing. And we're also going to take a little bit of a look at where we are on this adoption cycle. Are we in full hype mode, or are we still in that early stage of these new technologies coming through? Paras, welcome to the pod.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. Yeah, it's the best description I've had for a long time.
And I also understand you're a front man for a band, so that's something for a few glasses of beers. Maybe you can tell us more about that one. But
yeah, maybe.
Well, thank you very much for joining. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about some of the recent projects you've been working on to give a little bit of context to your role.
Yeah, absolutely. Procurement transformations are big on my agenda at the moment. I've been recently and currently most working with Deliveroo and their procurement supply chain team, and trying to make sure that they're relevant for whatever Deliveroo wants to be going forward. But also, I've worked in really interesting industries, financial services like Deutsche Bank, but FMCG, SAB Miller, when they used to be SAB Miller, but now are AB InBev, and generally in that kind of procurement, supply chain, sustainability, transformation space of sorts.
Excellent. Well, Deliveroo is definitely a family favourite, especially on Fridays with my youngest daughter. So today we're going to be talking about, I guess, the transformation of procurement. And I'm going to take the why, the how, and the what to how we're looking at new technologies to come into the function, because there needs to be a business impact and a reason why we're doing it. So maybe you could give us a little bit of an overview of why procurement is changing now. I guess we can talk about tariffs, but also the wider context of how procurement, the operating model is transforming as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying my best not to talk about tariffs, but it's impossible not to. And I think that is a contributory factor to what procurement is going through at the moment, which is impacting a whole bunch of things around operating models. Maybe if I reflect a bit over the last 10, 15 years, I think digital had a really big impact on rethinking operating models and reforming operating models for procurement and supply chain. And I think that has been almost transformed again through what we're seeing with more generative AI related activity, but just broadly that disruptive kind of economic environment. And so I don't think operating models have had to stand still or have had a chance to stand still really over the last 10 to 15 years. It's about how adaptive that operating model can be over time and agile, really.
Yeah. And what's the shift? There's been some interesting reports I think I shared with you earlier in the week, but we've been talking about how procurement's going up the value chain and driving a different value proposition. Are there any key themes that you can see really coming through as the companies you've been working with, but more broadly as you kind of look at the research from the consultancies as well, and the conversations you're having as well?
Yeah, I think there's a correlation from what I see with companies and with the consultancies in terms of what they're observing. If I take two or three to start with, inflation, and that inflationary environment is a big kind of raising of cost consciousness for companies again. Maybe they were trying to stay away from being labelled in that kind of cost conscious nature as a procurement function, but they've had to regain that and actually become heroes in that sort of environment. So one, definitely around inflation. I think the other thing has been around third party risk and resiliency, and just kind of being able to keep business continuity with all of the disruption that's going on, and recognizing what does business continuity mean versus just kind of engaging with suppliers, but that has really impacted stuff. And I think the third trend is digital disruption, but it's across the entire value chain for procurement. Some stuff that's been there for years, where you've got that kind of source to pay sort of life cycle being looked at, but other things that are just trying to manage some of those new trends around inflation and resiliency and sustainability related activity. So there's almost an evolution of that digital curve as well that it's having to go through, as procurement has had to go through its own evolution as well.
Yeah, there's I think there's the E&Y report and Gartner talking about some of the priorities of CPOs at the moment. It seems that sustainability, although it's slightly gone out of favour in some parts around net zero, seems the pressure's a little bit off corporates. It's still an area where people are investing time and money. I think the other parts are around the supplier collaboration space as well. So I guess that comes back into the resilience and also a security supply and some of the innovation coming through. I think this is where we're seeing, especially with the changes in the markets, we need to be bringing new innovation through, but also creating new supplier ecosystems to serve the new customer and consumer needs. And also when regulations, tariffs come in and so forth, we have to adapt very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that EY report was quite telling that those themes are coming into CPOs' minds and their organisations' minds front and centre across inflation, resiliency, disruption generally. But there's also a bit of a disconnect that I've seen where as companies are trying to adapt to that and trying to be a bit more agile about how do they deal with inflation and resiliency, they're kind of being a bit left behind with the digital track that they're also trying to take as well. So it's a bit of a conflict, I think, for CPOs and their leadership teams to kind of work through, which is how do they keep that digital momentum alongside dealing with real economic factors and real business factors that are, challenges that are day-to-day sort of BAU related stuff.
Yeah, I was catching up with Adam Brown from Maersk, and he's also at BT. So he created the procurement carriage over at BT, and I think he's scaled that at Maersk, and we're going to get him on the pod soon. But I guess that's one of the ways is create a safe place for experimenting with new technology in order to make sure you don't lose that momentum as everything else that happens in business is happening. But if it's just everything running the operating model today and the new technologies come through, there's not much flex in the operating model to actually bring new technologies in to look at how you support the operating model of tomorrow as well.
Yeah. And I think it puts even more pressure on those operating models in terms of how integrated they are with the rest of their business. Because let's say the front side of the business or the kind of the revenue generating side of the business, if the operating model is quite agile in that regard and procurement's operating model is quite stuck in whatever it's doing, then that's just getting exposed more and more. So procurement has to start thinking more entrepreneurially in terms of how it's working with the rest of the business to adapt that operating model, for sure.
Yes. So we're seeing budgets for CPOs in technology and in talent development, which is a common theme. But how are they deploying it? We're looking at now, I guess, a bit more into the how. How are companies rewiring their procurement organizations? We see, we hear about the trend of procurement orchestration and Gen AI. How they're approaching that at the moment? Where are you seeing that deployment of resources and cash?
Yeah, great question. I think the way I look at it at the moment is if everything's seen as a capability nowadays, so you've got a set of human talent capabilities, and then you've got a set of digital capabilities, and you've got a set of maybe process capabilities that might be there. I've seen CPOs kind of somewhat struggling at times with the equation of what's talent, what's digital, and how they both need to talk to each other. But the ones that are taking the challenge on are saying, well, actually, if we treat them all as capabilities, and your human capabilities, your people part of your function needs to think about super strengths of what those people are, what are they really, really good at, and what can they deliver for the function versus what can technology enhance in terms of capabilities for that function. They're the ones that are starting to tread into good territory of thinking about budgets as well. They're not just thinking about a headcount budget or independently, or they're not just thinking about a technology budget independently. They're thinking about the two coalescing to actually say, well, it's all a cost in some way and it's all a capability in some way. So how do they I've seen CPOs work with that sort of math as well to figure things out.
It's an interesting one. You talk about the capabilities, and I guess when we look at Gen AI, and we're now seeing the agentic side really coming through. It's whether it's capabilities of individuals or the agents who are helping augment the individuals, and I guess that human in the loop part of Gen AI and the people come in. So it's I hadn't thought about that kind of capability uplift.
Yeah, that human in the loop piece is I've heard that more and more nowadays, and I suppose it's about trying to define what that loop is. And if your loop is humans, tech, trying to get to an outcome of some sort, that's gonna mean that you've got to think about capabilities differently in that loop. It's my perspective. It's what I've seen a lot. I think if you've got a lens of capabilities, you start to naturally think, what's the most optimal way of me getting to business outcomes?
I should remember the TV program. Was it $1 Million Man or $1 Billion Man?
Right, yeah.
He had all sorts of augmentation of his body and so forth. But maybe we're moving to the $1 million category manager who's augmented with tech in there as well.
Could be, yeah.
I saw the McKinsey report as well. So they're talking about on the AI side, there's been a reasonable amount of investment over the last 18 months. I think there's been lots of proof of concepts being used, and I guess a slightly frustrated CEO community where they haven't seen the outcome or the return on investment. But the agentic side seems to be where they now see this is how they're going to rewire their organization. And I guess we are now seeing with the technologies coming into procurement, the possibilities of how generative AI and AI agents will start augmenting these roles or taking away some of the grunt work from the procurement department as well.
Definitely. And again, if we rewind maybe a year or two ago, I think AI in the conversation of procurement was a lot about repetitive processes and repetitive tasks that maybe the transactional part of procurement needed, automate procure to pay, automate the kind of invoicing and the downstream related activities. But with the agentic kind of discussion, nothing's really off the table when it comes to that end-to-end procurement value chain. And you point on category managers and category strategists and supplier relationship managers. The reality is they all have repetitive tasks, and they all have tasks that can be quite burdensome in terms of brain processing power. And I think the agentic kind of debate is really pushing the boundaries of, well, where does a category manager's real sort of core skill set need to lie alongside something that could be pushing them from an agentic perspective. So I can see it. It's just whether people are taking the leap enough to want to push it as well.
Well, I think that's the part. It's so many opportunities to use it. It's finding focused areas to invest the time with. And we spoke to Matt Ziske from Bungalow VC, former CPO himself, about really getting to know the founders. But you obviously need to be a bit obsessed about the problem you're looking to solve, and then are you going to spend that time to work with those founders and bring that technology in? But you're not going to be able to do that across the whole of the procurement process as well. I think the other thing in other conversations we're having is this focus on outcomes. So I think we've always been, I guess, on the whole, 20 years of maybe a few more than 20 years now in the procurement world, are talking about we've been optimizing the process. Now people, as we look at capability, are more focused about the outcomes, especially with AI. You're probably just letting the AI think about redesigning the processes in order to achieve the outcome, because you can achieve it in different ways than just the manual process. Yeah,
definitely. And again, that's a step change, isn't it, of how AI was thought about in the past. AI as a solution to repetitive tasks means not really getting to outcomes. It's kind of inputs-based repetitive tasks, whereas the agentic possibility is helping deliver those outcomes alongside the person who is a human trying to reach those outcomes. And that's a different ball game, I would say, for people who are professionals to engage with technology. That it's almost like a more active AI participant rather than a passive kind of helper of sorts.
Yeah. And I guess we're seeing the rewiring of the customer interface already. I'm not obviously I go on Deliveroo and order some food from there. Or my daughter kind of picks it and I press the button to pay, more likely. But you're seeing it at Booking.com, looking at the travel agenda and how agents are looking at the whole experience of a trip now as well. So we're seeing AI being adopted for quite a lot on the front end of the business, but now it's coming internally about how we can, transform the operations as well.
That's absolutely right. I mean, if we think about some of the buying experience stuff that used to happen when some of the bigger technology players were thinking about guided buying and that kind of activity, I suppose it was trying to mirror a bit of the Amazonian kind of, buying processes or consumer processes of Amazon. And then to your point on, consumer facing stuff, there's no reason why you can't reapply that to the procurement part of the value chain. It's still user experience as such. And you're actually looking at probably a wider ecosystem of users in that ecosystem. So the last thing you want is to have really redundant processes or redundant technology not helping itself kind of be engaged with. So I think there's a great opportunity, really.
It is really. I mean, it kind of leads into the next part, but I caught up with Matt. He's in London, Matt Ziske, for a coffee earlier. So he was talking about the Zip team. He used to be at Airbnb with him. And I guess what they did is on the intake, they took one step before where Cooper was originally, and created the interfaces there on the intake piece. And then it's built out a whole, a company over at Zip. I'm not sure their valuation now, but 3-4 billion.
It's big.
And a new and a whole new category of solutions in there as well. But we're seeing that. I think when Dave and Noah set up Cooper back in the day, it was to bring the Amazon experience. But ultimately, I think Cooper has become more like the Ariba as they've gone into the suite, and now we got Zip coming with the next kind of approach on that. But it's fascinating. So orchestration, if we get into the how. Orchestration seems to be the buzzword, and we got the reality versus hype. What's your view on orchestration? Because it seems that every company's looking at it. And I say, I guess, is it like teenage sex? Everyone talking about, no one doing it. But what's your view on procurement orchestration as a theme?
I'll try and dismiss that analogy. Interesting. I mean, if we put aside for a moment the tech part of orchestration, I'm assuming a lot of business folks or procurement folks were trying to orchestrate their processes quite a lot when even the Coopers and Arebas were around of this world, and then they were trying to figure out how is this kind of plugging in with other SaaS related stuff within their business, how are they working with different functions, with different technologies, and trying to all come together. And then I think this kind of Internet of Things concept sort of crept into everything, and it was that kind of platform play, more of a platform play, where you could have plug and play related concepts. And I think that was a real open door actually for procurement to rethink how it thinks about its front end, its kind of engagement front end, because there's so many experiences that a user has with all of these different systems that they want that simplified experience. And a lot of that comes through realizing that everything is in that kind of Internet of Things layer, and orchestration was just the thing that helped wrap that in the right way. So I totally see the benefit of some of these new players maybe we'd talk about as well that have kind of treaded into this space when some of the more legacy source to pay systems weren't quite able to move into that space, or didn't really feel like it was an important space to step into. But I'd also say that orchestration right now is solving one part of the value chain, or a primary part of the value chain, which is that intake side of things. But orchestration could be a wider sort of more accessible platform in a way that responds to multiple stakeholder needs, multiple user needs across that value chain too.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I was at the Zip event last week, but obviously the teams at Aura and Omnia and others, there's probably 4 or 5 companies in this space, and all very good and building their own customer base as well. But yeah, maybe it is going back to what was that product? If this not that, or an FFF, whatever T and Zapier and so forth, connecting up these systems is probably where it all came from.
Yeah.
But fascinating how quickly they've grown, or this category's grown, because I don't think we were really talking about it 2 years ago in any shape or form, and it's just now seems to be there. And large enterprises now picking up. I think I heard some very large businesses now, FTSE 100 companies implementing it, and some big DAX companies bringing it on board. So it makes sense for the simplicity in there, but the rollout can't be that simple. You still need to get the right processes in place.
Yeah, definitely. And you need to understand what your processes are in your business to make it work. If you implement something to do with intake or orchestration, and it's just based on one part of your scope, then to some degree you've just put a nice interface in place for something that's not quite connected with all of the other things. So understanding what that sort of ecosystem is in your own internal organization is part of the challenge to get that right. I think you're right. It's still hard work. But it's fast tracking that change curve that a lot of organizations wrestle with when they implement a classic kind of procure to pay system. Ultimately they're just trying to wrestle control from their business in many ways to kind of funnel spend and cost through one place. But the effort that it takes to do that is that everybody's a buyer in the business, really. So to try and fast track that through orchestration, there's good business rationale to do it. It's solving a complex pain point in terms of change management challenges. I would like for that to then start evolving across the entirety of that source to pay, source to settle, supplier life cycle kind of territory as well. And then it's going to start really kind of coming together for all users.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. I can see how it's coming through. Where else, when you look through those reports, but also your experience, you talked about the contract life cycle and supplier side.
Yeah.
I mean, they're complex. Obviously, in my background at Visible, I've been working in that supplier collaboration side, and I think when you were at SAB Miller, you put a really strong program in there. Not many companies have digitized that whole supplier experience. I think there's been more around the capture of third-party risk and making it simpler in there, but the SRM side is in most organizations still a bit of a greenfield site.
Yeah, and I mean, as well as anybody, Mark, with Visible and other experiences, that I think until somebody understands that supplier management is actually quite a fragmented set of activities, then they won't fully realize the digital potential of supplier management in a larger company, let's say a bigger company like a SAB or a Deutsche Bank, for example, even quite large supplier communities, some bigger and some smaller than others. But if supplier management is just seen as maybe getting some KPIs from suppliers, then that's really a small part of the challenge that you're trying to digitize in that space. You've got supplier risk, as you said, supplier information management. You've got supplier relationship kind of profiling of stuff. You've got kind of the similar side of CRM to SRM. And as you start stitching all of that together, you realize that actually there's a massive kind of set of digital processes that need to be enabled to make that work. But I still see, most of the companies I work with still see how they operate supply management in silos. And they've got a vendor management kind of function doing this here, and then they've got a supplier risk sort of area doing this here. There are some that are trying to bring that together and trying to bring it under one roof. But generally it's operated, or decision making is happening in different parts of the business to make that happen. So I think that's still a change program that needs to happen alongside a digital enablement program. Yeah,
I think there's some capability part, and we talk about capabilities as well, is having those dedicated resources or the skill set in there, and also allowing the operating model allow for them to do the job.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at that strategic part of the relationship management, that's quite often going to the category manager, who is also doing X, Y, and Z as well. So there's a bottleneck there, and when price and cost becomes a topic area. Sometimes the supplier relationship parts kind of disappear from the executive agenda as well as from the procurement agenda. So it's how do you keep that sustainable approach with your suppliers? Because sometimes in the tough times, that's the most important times as well.
True, yeah. And if you look at suppliers in current environment, back to some of those themes we were talking about with the EY report and other trends in the business, those pressures of how you need to work with suppliers through inflationary environments, through resilience environments. It's a different thing when you're engaging with a supplier on co-innovation and co-sourcing activities, and therefore suppliers have to change their shades dependent on that economic environment. And if you're not helping them change those shades or adapt to those things, then you're really just treating them as a transactional entity a lot of the time. So it's adapting. I mean, procurement has got its own challenge adapting to the business, but its bigger challenge is helping the supply community adapt to its business as well.
And the speed of change is quicker than we've ever seen before. COVID was one example of it. What we're seeing with tariffs is another example. So it does seem that a strategic advantage of large organizations is now the ability for the business to adapt their supplier ecosystem at speed for sustainable supply, but also driving to new markets and launching new products as well.
Definitely. I learned a lot from my SAB Miller experience with that. I think that as your commodities become more and more part of your value chain, you have to really start opening your mind up to what that possibility is with a supplier and how they work with your business to deliver front end outcomes as much as kind of operating outcomes. And you've got to get into a good discussion with suppliers around that in a way that also challenges the business around how they see suppliers, working with them, whether they're actually partners, whether they're just, places that you can actually just transact from. You've got to work with the business on shaping that in the right way.
So back to the hype cycle with Gen AI. Are you seeing, as you speak to these companies actually adopting Gen AI, or is it more talking about it and talking about the technology companies, or are they actually taking the step to test it and run proof of concepts? Where are we in the hype cycle of Gen AI?
Yeah, I see from a procurement lens, I see a lot more proof of concept related activity. Maybe some of that is a confidence thing. Just what's the potential? What's the implication of bringing in Gen AI into a team? And back to capabilities. What's the capability of your current team alongside Gen AI? So I think the proof of concept territory is a reasonable starting point that I've seen companies adopt. But if I take myself out of procurement and think about digitally savvy companies or digitally centric companies, now I'm working with one right now, and Gen AI is everything that the company needs to try and adhere to. It needs to think about from a consumer perspective, from a generational perspective, the kinds of people who are coming through their career ladders, what are they engaging with? Pervasive technology, pervasive generative AI access. And so their own behaviors are geared around that. So I think more digitally centric companies are already leaping into that mold. So I think procurement has to have its own wake-up call a lot of the time, say, look, if most businesses are starting to tread in that territory and need to move into that territory, you can't just see it as a kind of external factor. It's an internal factor to us as well that needs to be transformed.
Yeah, and I guess it's easier for the digitally native or Gen AI native or AI native, whatever their classification we should have there, to the larger organizations. And I guess also there's change. You're contracted with a supplier for several years on these things, and it's already been ingrained in there. So it's also the addition of new solutions or new Gen AI on top of your current solutions, which will need to come through. But I think the stats from the reports, I think 76%, maybe got the stat wrong, are looking to invest in Gen AI over the next 3 years. So I guess the larger organizations are maybe fast followers on some of these things. But again, they'll have to focus. Where do they start on these things, and where do they create a safe and from the conversation with Lucy and Andrew previously as well, ethically in the right way as well. So, how are we working with suppliers on buying decisions and so forth? There's a ethical side as well as does the technology work.
Yeah, definitely. And you can't lose sight of that ethical responsibility in the whole play. Supplier ethics, just in terms of classic modern slavery related stuff, and things that are driven by the external supplier ethical considerations, but also digital ethics of what that means. Back to retention of information, retention of data, retention of knowledge. That all becomes part of the discussion when it comes to Gen AI and how that is replacing certain activities that maybe procurement professionals may have been doing in the past. So I think trying to take a wider consideration around ethics beyond just the kind of supply chain ethics piece is an important piece at the moment as well.
And when do you, we never know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, but what happens? Do we have more people in the organization, in the procurement organization, or do we have the same amount of people driving a more valuable, a higher value proposition for procurement with AI, or does AI just take over everything in procurement?
You put me into clairvoyance mode there, I think, Mark.
There's no right or right answer.
No. It's I think about this a lot, actually, for our profession and for the profession. I think there has to be an acceptance that coexistence needs to happen over the next 5 years, whatever the situation. Coexistence, because there's more pressure on optimizing your footprint as a procurement function, supply chain function, whatever, optimizing your footprint to deliver outcomes. And to do that, you're going to have to coexist with human talent and smart Gen AI related activity and orchestration stuff, all that kind of thing. And I still think it's an open question on what does the future look like for the CPO? Let's just even say for the CPO themselves, because the CPO right now, you could argue, is an orchestrator of a whole bunch of activities and teams and deliveries and suppliers and all that kind of stuff in reasonably sized organizations. But if they're augmented with a lot more AI, naturally you're going to start questioning what's the CPO's remit in its own right, in terms of what's it adding value to alongside smart AI capabilities. And I think CPO is going to need to stand up and look at their own super strengths. What are they really bringing to the table when it comes to this kind of activity? It shouldn't be about protectionism as such. It's just really trying to continue to understand the distinction between what AI can bring versus what a leader might need to bring. That's a big part. And leadership, I think, is something that keeps going through my mind at the moment. What are the kind of leaders that we really need now to take this stuff forward in the next 5 years? And I don't think we've always got the right leaders in place to have that debate, if I'm honest.
Are you encouraged with the procurement leaders of the future? There must be a few individuals that you speak and see and talk to who have got the capabilities. So are you excited about the future ones in terms of the ones you met, or you think there's a big gap?
Yeah, excited about the future ones for sure. And I think there's some that probably don't even get a chance or an opportunity to feel like they're in that leadership trajectory in some ways. I'm nervous about the ones that are inheriting responsibilities that don't necessarily have the capabilities or don't really know how to look at this landscape, because this landscape's coming fast and it's already existing. But it takes a level of maturity to think about this landscape alongside what your footprint is with an organization. So I think we've got a bit of a dual path at the moment. Those fast up and comers and mature kind of worldly, thought-provoking individuals who are going to try and take on good leadership positions within new business, versus the ones that probably have a level of understanding but aren't really pivoting to what that future might look like, because they've not fully understood what their capabilities are themselves. Mm. And so I'm excited but also a bit nervous with that, I think.
Yeah, I think net curiosity or a net curiosity score. Rick Vera gave me he wrote the book on it and gave me the term. But we're looking for people with high net curiosity, both as CPOs or leaders, but also their team, to see how they rewire the business, look at how Gen AI can come through, and I guess unlock these capabilities. I was really impressed with the team at AstraZeneca. Kieran over there is he's got the role of head of category for AI and emerging technology.
Okay.
Which, having one person looking at that, as you look at how AI will be coming in across the whole organization, as well as obviously the procurement side, is you need a specialism in that space, because it's not a generalist role to have in there. How are you using Anthropic or OpenAI in there? What are some of these amazing APIs that may be common across these different applications? It's a very different technology to buy, and I think that's also where procurement, as they see the supplier market around this and work closely with the business, they can really make a big change in there as well. So I'm hoping we'll see a lot more Kierans and head of AI and emerging trends, or a version of that as we go forward as well. And I guess we need to see where this money get deployed, because if we think there's still quite a lot going into the tech space, are they going to go into the traditional solutions that are already off the shelf that we've seen for maybe the last 10 years and upgrading those, or are they actually going to be putting a proportion of that budget towards the next gen, because the speed of this is all coming through as well. But I think they'll have to be fast followers, and then you're going to be innovators in some categories as well.
Yeah. Just reflecting on that, actually, I think I do hope the Kierans of this world actually start replicating those roles actually in many functions, and established ones in particular, but also newer functions that are kind of treading into this territory for the first time. And it probably goes back to what we were saying about procurement entrepreneurialism. A classic old school IT buyer might have been looking at hardware, software, and just kind of optimizing costs in that space. A new IT buyer is on a different planet compared to that old IT buyer. They are very product savvy, very sort of technologically curious, like you said, but also they're thinking about new product entry and new product markets, which means that they've got to be quite revenue hungry in some ways, and that's a different brief of a category professional in that space of the past compared to the future. So I totally encourage it, hope it happens more, but I think the more of those kinds of folks you're having in organizations is just going to really push those boundaries more, rather than classic traditional roles.
Cool. So if you were to go into it, let's say I'm going to put you into another hypothetical situation, Paras. If you were to go into a large FTSE company tomorrow as the CPO, and you had 100 coins for your tech budget, how would you allocate them, and what people would you bring in around that allocation of budget? Who would inform you on those?
Yeah, great question. I would try and look at those 100 coins as widely as I possibly could, and again, back to what we were discussing around people budgets versus non-people budgets, or tech budgets versus non-tech budgets. I try and blend the two as much as possible together, and I would have people who are really at the forefront of thinking about new generation operating models, driving that kind of potential change within the business and creating a case for change in terms of what that might look like. And because they will be thinking out the box more often than not, and they might be less thinking about their internal needs as such, so thinking more about what's the art of the possible. So I think the new generation of folks looking to build that roadmap. I also think commerciality can't be ignored. So you've got to have good commercial people who are looking at that spend of 100 coins in a way that's going to be effectively spent, and maybe 100 coins this year, but potentially 100 coins the year after, and 80 coins the year after that, and just trying to optimize what that continued footprint might look like, as that roadmap is thought through. So a good set of commercial folks who understand that, alongside somebody who's like a bit of an antagonist to the company. But also just try and get to know your business. Try and really, really get to know your business. If your business is forward thinking, you might have an open door for that 100 coins. Invest to return. But if your business is a bit static and kind of constrained by its own, legacy in some ways, you might find that 100 coins is just sunk cost, sunk cost into nothingness, and you may as well just put in whatever kind of platform is appropriate. But I think understanding what your business direction is in that space will help you kind of invest it in the right, sensible way.
There we go. We'll put the full 100 coins on that magic bean.
Done.
And get the beanstalk coming through. So we talked about this being the hype or reality. So let's look at procurement orchestration. Mm-hmm. If we look at Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, we had innovators, early adopters, and then early majority. And then there's the laggards, but we're definitely not in that. Are we, procurement orchestration, have we gone beyond the innovators and we early adopters, or are we getting into the early majority?
I say early adopters still, I would say, somewhere maybe between early adopters and early majority. I mean, as you said before, some of the new players like the Zips, the Omnias, the Oros, they've started with something maybe that's quite small as a concept and as a product market fit with businesses. But then once that kind of has effervesced that this is what the potential is, it seems to have exploded quite quickly. So it seems like it's moving quite fast as a product that's come to market. It's moving quite fast comparative to maybe an end-to-end source-to-pay platform that companies are trying to implement. I think it does go back to, if we're going to get into the majorities, it goes back to what is the business trying to solve when it comes to procurement, or what is the CPO trying to solve when it comes to procurement? Is it stakeholder satisfaction? Because if stakeholder satisfaction is at the top of your mind, you may go straight to orchestration and say, that's going to help me reduce the noise, reduce the pain that I feel on a day-to-day basis. Why would I not want that as fast as I possibly can, and bring some stuff together to increase stakeholder satisfaction? But if your driver is you just don't have a view on aggregated costs, or you've never really done much category strategy, for example, with your business, maybe your maturity point is starting at a slightly different place, and you've got to start getting your arms around doing good category strategies and doing good sourcing related activity. And therefore your curve to orchestration might be a bit slower. But I think for those who are kind of saying, look, I've just had enough of my stakeholders saying there's too much bureaucracy, too much pain in my processes with procurement, it's a bit of a low hanging fruit, isn't it, for them to think about?
Well, I think we put procurement orchestration as they've crossed the chasm. I think the likes of Zip and Oro have got big enterprise customers in there, and there's tens and hundreds of customers in there. So I think we've crossed the chasm into the early majority. Gen AI in procurement. Are we the innovator stage? Are we in the early adopters? I'm not sure we're anywhere near the chasm on that one.
No, is there a minus chasm maybe that we're? I don't know. Yeah, very early stage. I think we're just looking at other Gen AI capabilities across our business and saying, oh, that might work in our space, but we've not really thought through how to proactively think about Gen AI in our day-to-day work. So much opportunity for growth there.
So very much innovators, and I think that's why we need to for people to take that view. Which areas are we going to innovate on, and which areas are we going to be fast followers? So still be passionate and really tracking those categories, but then allowing some other companies to play around on those ones and test them out, and double down on some proof of concepts where you can be the innovator and really drive the impact on that as well.
Definitely. I feel like it's quite risk-free as well to experiment with that stuff. What's there really to lose? If anything, it can enhance a person's kind of capacity in the short term. So it's quite risk-free to experiment. I think the challenge of moving through that is still back to the maturity of a leader allowing for that space to kind of be entered. So will they go, by the way, this can really enhance what you do on a day-to-day basis and give you the freedom to start thinking about how to use your capabilities in different ways? Or are they just kind of still relatively resistant to the idea of something else taking on a set of tasks that they would have potentially hired a person for to do? I still think that's the kind of the leap that people are trying to go through.
I think the other part of that is how the tech providers come with this as well. So how do they allow those proof of concepts for allowing people to play around in some degree and take it through, and also speed to value. And that's what we should be seeing with the Gen AI side. Quick speed to value, start small, scale. And I guess the commercial models are different. We're seeing a lot more people moving away from seats to outcome focused, which ultimately should be easier to take some of your 100 coins and spend them wisely as more outcomes come from the solution, which can deliver results for the business as well.
Definitely. I think speed to value is a great point. I think I'd be 99.9% confident if I asked most CPOs in the world, do they have a problem with what their stakeholders think about speed to value? They'd all say yes.
There we go.
In some way, shape or form. Some might be better than others, but they'll all say the business struggle with that speed to value. So it's a great lever to use alongside getting to outcomes. It's a great lever to use to kind of help push that experimental debate and say, well, how can we increase speed to value more often than not? So yeah, pretty open door. It's just maturity. Part of it.
Well, thank you very much, Paras. It's been great to have your insight on this. I'm going to ask you to come back maybe in a few months' time, and we'll talk about your golden coins again, where you would spend them, and maybe we can look at where we are in the hype cycle around AI. And I'm sure there'll be some more examples that we can talk about on this. And we'll also have to learn a little bit more about your singing career, and maybe we can use some of your tunes to be the opener for the next podcast as well.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely there if that's the case.
There we go. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
I enjoyed it. Thanks, Mark.
Cheers.